Welcome back to the Kingsview Model Railway channel. Today we're going to talk about the 5 things that you can do to enhance your model railway while you're building it and or designing it. So stay tuned for some great tips. Okay, let's get into this. So tip number 1 is curves. So let's have a look at the curve over here on the layout here, just past Rocky Point. These curves are a minimum of 36-inch radius. The minimum one is about 40 inches and the passing loop is about 44 inches. Now the reason why I want to talk about curves is on your layout, do your very, very best you can to make your curves the largest radius as possible. I mean, too often we see curves on layouts that are just too tight, and the manufacturers always say, let's, have a look on the box. Often it says, this locomotive or rolling stock is suitable for 18-inch minimum radius curves. But the reality is that you want to have your curves on your layout as larger radius as you possibly can have, because out in reality, particularly in New South Wales, for instance, the minimum curve is about 200 metres radius, and when you look at model railway layouts, those curves are much tighter than the minimum radius that are set out prototypically. So it's important to set your curves as large as you can possibly make them. Following on from point 1, one of the most important things to have on your model railway to enhance the running characteristics and something to consider right at the design phase is to have a think about the longest train you're going to run on your layout. Now, in my case, the longest trains that I run are the original Southern Aurora from 1960s onwards. And I also run the Great Southern train. Both of these trains are 14-car trains, and with a couple of locomotives they actually add up to about 16 cars long. So I've actually got a siding here that starts way over here and runs all the way around with a 42-inch curve, as I stated before, right over to this point here where the passing loop joins back onto the main line. So if you're considering having a passing loop or passing loops on your layout, always consider the longest train that you're going to run, because you probably want to be able to park it somewhere so that other trains can pass it when you're having operating sessions. So always think about how long your passing loops are, and also consider too when you're building your yard, that if you have a ladder model where you have points running down one side and points up the other side, that by the time you get to the 4th or 5th or 6th passing loop, you're actually ending up with very, very short passing loops. So always consider somewhere on your layout trying to have as long a passing loop as possible so you can run those long trains. Okay, let's get down to point number 3 is tunnels. Now, when we were kids, everybody loved seeing trains go in and out of tunnels. And no doubt, they look really great on a number of layouts. But in reality, the railways only built tunnels when they couldn't build cuttings. And I contend that on the average model railway, a tunnel is a difficult thing to deal with, because you only have a small amount of space in any model railway, and what tunnels do is hide your trains. And in my view, I don't think that they're a great thing for model railways. It's not that exciting to see trains, you can't see trains in tunnels, you just can't see them. And they have a whole range of problems when it comes to derailing, goods wagons and passenger carriages coming off in tunnels. It's a common problem that I see, another problem that you see on model railways. So if you have a look here, I've got this lovely cutting here. I've been able to have this beautiful bridge crafted, which is a prototypical bridge in New South Wales. You know, you can have cars up on the bridge, you know, you can have people looking over the edge of the bridge. And it's a talking point. Everybody who's seen this railway says that scene is just a fabulous part of your layout. So when you've got a cutting like this, you can actually then hyper detail it. You know, we've got timber abutments under the bridge, we've got realistic looking rocks, you know, we've got track repairs, we've got track signs. These are all the things that if I'd have had a tunnel portal here and then had just scenery up here, you wouldn't have been able to see any of this detail at all. So in my view, you know, unless it's absolutely necessary, steer clear of tunnels on your railway. In reality, out in railway land, you know, tunnels are very few and far between, and they're really only to go underneath very, very big hills or mountains. And most railways used to have big, deep cuttings. And when you have a lovely, big, deep cutting like this, you can make it very scenic and very prototypical on your railway. I think we'd all agree that a loco and some wagons coming through a cutting under a bridge looks much better than going in a tunnel. Okay, point number 4, strangely enough, is about points. Now what you're looking at here is what we call a crossover. So I have these small turnout controls on here, and they simply control so I can change from one track to the other. Now in my particular case, this is actually on a curve, quite a slender curve, and I've actually used large radius curved points for the turnover, for the crossover. It's an important part, so you can go from this line to this line, so I can actually enter the turntable yard back around a Kingsview station. But equally, when there's been work done on this main line, I can run trains from the down to the up line, and then I can transfer them back with another crossover further down the layout. But when you're designing your crossovers, have a think, when you're designing your layout, have a good think about where crossovers would need to be able to traverse trains from one direction to the other, and make sure that they're actually realistic and use realistically large turnouts, because again, out there in railway land, these turnouts are needed to be fairly large radius so that trains can traverse at, 70, 80, 90 kilometres an hour, or 35 to 50 miles an hour. So sharp radius points which are used in yards aren't suitable for mainline crossovers between two main lines. So that's the point about crossovers. Have a think about where they need to be on your layout, and they form a very good function for running realistically, because these days not every train runs on a down line or an up line. Sometimes they run the other way around. Often on weekends there's track maintenance or of an evening, and trains need to run on the other main. So if you're wanting to run realistic trains, then have a think about putting crossovers in your design so that you can go from one track to the other. And here you can see the other crossover at the other end of the Bythungra yard. You can see trains traversing back onto the correct main. So point number 5 again is about points, and you'll have to excuse it's just starting to rain. But when you've got a main line like we have here, this is our through main line, and here we've got a line that traverses off to go to the other main lines and also off into Davidstown Yard. You really want to use the largest radius point possible. So to give you a comparison, this is a Pico large radius code 100 point, and this point here, I'm putting over the top here, as you can see, it's that much shorter. That is a short radius point, which is what you would use in a yard where you're only running smaller switches like this one here. So I'll just put it on the track here. So this is a little yard switcher, New South Wales yard switcher, 73 class. These work really well on these size points, but bigger locos, you know, they work okay on the smaller points, but they're really what's really designed for the large points is large locos, small points. So in a yard, using these smaller points actually means that you actually have longer sidings. So if you can possibly avoid it, try not to use these shorter points on your main lines, because that's where you're running your big trains with potentially your bigger locomotives. So always consider using these smaller points, tighter radius in your yards. So I'll just pan the camera up here and you can see over here, I'll just zoom over a little bit over here, and you can see here these points over here, where is it, just over here. I'll just move the camera up a little bit more, make it a bit wider. These points over here, they are all the shorter radius points. They also give you the maximum length of a yard for storing wagons on. So if you use large radius points in your yard, you're always going to end up with shorter areas to store your locomotives and store your trains. So, you know, as we pan back over the yard here, we can see that we've got large radius here, we've got large radius here, because again this is a main line, and we've still got a large radius here, but then we move into short radiuses over the other side here. So all in all, pick the right points for the part of the layout that you're going to be using for the type of purpose that it is. So again, long radius, large radius, now these are Pico Insel Frog 100s. Now in code 83, which is a finer scale again, you can actually get larger points again. And if I ever did another layout, I'd probably use code 83, because all of my locos and rolling stock are all fine scale, and it's probably a little bit more realistic than the code 100, but code 100 will run everything that you might have in your train arsenal. So I hope these tips have been helpful, and you know, as you're designing your layout, just have considerations for those 5 main points that I've brought up in this video today. And happy modelling, and we'll see you next time.